Thank you to those who joined us in person. We appreciate the opportunity to try out a hybrid work environment for this and see how it goes. Anyone who's online and being able to hear us or having difficulties hearing us, please let us know. We are going to go ahead and start our drinking water advisory work group for the month of October of 2022. Hopefully you've received an agenda. If you have not, please feel free to reach out to us at DWAWG, DWAWG at tceq.texas.gov and be added to our listserv to get those sent out to you. Couple of housekeeping items. If y'all are here I believe everyone I see has been here before, but there are restrooms just outside to the left here. If you're to females restroom, there's a mirrored version on the other side of the elevators. Oh, thanks, James. If you need a men's restroom, there is also a cafe behind the elevators that serves coffee and other things like that if you're in need of any refreshment. We are planning to be in the general stakeholder group meeting this morning from 9 until approximately noon. And then we will also have a standalone lead and copper rule revisions advisory work group this afternoon from about 1 to 2. It'll be back in the same room. And if you're joining online, there is a separate web link for that. So feel free to go to our website, DWAWG, to register. There's a second link below the meeting announcement that says for the stakeholder group in particular. All right. Well, with that, I would like to start ahead on our agenda. One item that has changed since the one that I sent out to everybody was the occupational licensing was left off. So my apologies. Tamara Calhoun, I see that you are joined with us. Would you like to go ahead and hop on and give us your operational licensing updates?
Yes, happy to. Thank you for letting us squeeze in. My name is Tamara Calhoun. I'm trying to turn my camera on. I am the new section manager at occupational licensing. Shannon Watson, who was the previous section manager, has left the agency, so I've taken her place. I'd also like to introduce our new team leader, which is Teresa Etheridge. If you want to pop in and say hello for 1 second. Thank you. So we do have some really important updates that we thought this meeting would be a good place to make those announcements. The first thing that I'd like to discuss is paper exams for occupational licensing. As of September 1st, 2022, TCEQ regional offices will no longer be conducting paper exams. The exception to that rule would be Americans with Disability Act accommodations, so special accommodations for those that meet ADA requirements. In FY 2022, occupational licensing diligently was working on revising and converting all licensing exams from paper to computer-based testing. All of those exams have now been converted, with the exception of our OSSF site evaluator, as well as our landscape irrigator exams. Those two are still being offered by the Texas Engineering Extension Service by paper. All other exams are available on CBT now. Additionally, occupational licensing has been collaborating with the Texas American Water Works Association to create a statewide program for high schools to encourage students to pursue careers in the water field and to reduce barriers to employment. Licensing will offer guidance and approve the training modules once they are completed. This concept will involve creating TCEQ approved training videos done by TCEQ qualified instructors. These videos will then be offered to high school students across the state for classes that are taught by Texas Education Association certified teachers. The biggest challenge in the past to scaling up existing high school education programs has been finding instructors that are both qualified by TCEQ and certified by TEA. These video modules would eliminate that barrier and would allow the program to be readily available to high schools that are interested in the program. Recently, our Deputy Director, Haya Zeman, and her special assistant, Becca Moore, went to their recording studio and recorded some videos of just some licensing qualification and application processes. These will used as what they're called brain breaks in between the modules, just to kind of let the students know how they can obtain a license and what the application process is for the high school student. So we're very excited that this program is up and coming, and we hope to have that done. I assume, Haya, you can chime in on this. I think by the end of this FY, hopefully we should have that done.
Yeah, I was trying to connect. And yes, so the last time I spoke with them, they said that they were very hopeful that they could have it been ready by the spring semester, but we still need to have our own review. So the more realistic deadline would be to start in the fall of the next school year.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, so the other thing that I wanted to discuss is resiliency. So to meet the requirements of Senate Bill 3, licensing is working with the Water Supply Division to develop requirements for additional resiliency training for water operators to be better prepared for future power outages or rolling blackouts. This is all due to the Storm Uri, I think it's called, the whole snowstorm and ice storm that we had back in early 2021. We've drafted a new policy requiring resiliency training for current water operator licensees. This policy will outline the requirement that all current licensed water operators must complete. We're projecting right now about 2 hours of resiliency training as part of their 30 hours of continuing education credits that are required. The resiliency training will not increase the overall amount of CEUs required to renew the license. It will be included in the total 30 hours. So just want to make sure that everyone is aware of that. We will also be requiring this as part of the core training when individuals decide to obtain a new license or upgrade their license as well. There's currently a variety of existing courses that cover the resiliency, and training providers are likely to develop more as time goes on. So this requirement will not significantly impede operators in obtaining their continuing education. Long-term strategy that we're working on, we'll start revising the curriculum for the core courses to include that resiliency for water systems sometime this year, but the priority will be given to the basic water curriculum in FY23. This process involves reviewing the current curriculum and developing new resiliency modules. Once the topics are developed, licensing will notify the existing core training providers of the new required topics and issue a recall for those core courses. We will allow a significant time to transition and incorporate these training manuals in core courses. So it's not something that's just going to happen overnight. We'll transition as needed. Once training providers have revised their core training and continuing education courses, licensing will revise our Chapter 30, TAC 30, Chapter 30 rules to memorialize the policy that we've developed in the short term. We'll put that in rule as the long term. That is all I have. I know it was a lot, so if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Haya Zeman, our Deputy Director, is also here to answer questions if anyone has any. Okay, I don't see any questions, so thank you guys very much.
I do have one question. Since the licenses have transitioned to computer-based testing, what have you seen any trends in the pass and failure rates?
So far, the pass-fail rates have pretty much remained the same as they have been throughout the years, whether the exam was paper or computer-based. So just to confirm, it's the same test. It's just that one is available on a computer at an approved CBT center, and the other one, of course, was just taken by paper. So the pass rates have remained about the same.
Okay.
Would it be possible that you're referring to the water exam, that transition from the essays to the multiple choice, maybe?
I was looking overall, just the ability for some people, technology being a barrier, but also, yeah, the concern of the water A being, going from essay to being computer-based, and if you've seen a change based on that, format change.
I think, Tamara, didn't we see a little bit of a dip in the pass rate for a little while and then it leveled off?
Yes, that is typical with any new exam at any level, even the D level, that when a new exam comes out, that the pass rate drops a little bit until it levels out. One of those reasons being that there's very few exams to compare it to. So you have two people that's taken the exam and neither one has passed. So of course your pass rate's going to be 0. You have 100 that's taken the test and 50 passed, 50 didn't, then you have a 50%. So obviously the more people you have taken the exam affects the pass rate. So that's one reason for the lower pass rates when they first come out.
Anybody else? No. All right. Thank you, Tamara. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. The next group on our update schedule is the Plan and Technical Review section. And with those updates, we have Joel Klump, their manager, joining us. Joel?
Good morning, everybody. Like Michelle said, I'm here to give a brief update for the Plan and Technical Review section. Within my section, our staff who review submittals of plans and specifications, exception requests, and CT studies. I don't have any new information to share. Staff are busy keeping up with the flow of submittals as they come in. We have had a couple recent questions regarding submittal of CT studies. So CT, or concentration time studies, are also known as disinfection protocols and describe the disinfection process at surface water treatment plants. Those submittals can be sent along with all other submittals for the section to our email box, which is ptr@tceq.texas.gov. And I'm going to drop that into the chat to make sure that everybody has it. And that was really the only update that I had this morning, is just wanting to make sure that everybody out there is aware of the best way to get an electronic submittal to us. So let me pause there and see if there are any questions for Plan and Technical Review section. All right, well, I will be here for the rest of the meeting as well as the LCRR stakeholder meeting after lunch. So any questions that you might have for my section, feel free to just put those into the chat and I'll get back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. I am the next one up on your list of presenters this morning. So let me go ahead and bring some stuff up real quick. So for the drinking water standards section, we have a couple of updates that I just want to kind of put on your radar. The first one is that it is now the month of October and lead and copper reduced has finished. So yesterday was the reporting deadline, October the 10th. Now is a fantastic time to go into Drinking Water Watch and make sure that your results actually were reported in by your laboratory. If you go in and you do not see your results, please feel free to reach out to your laboratory and ask where those results might be, and make sure that they have been transmitted to us appropriately. Obviously, monitoring is a very important part, but reporting is also an actual rule requirement. So making sure that you have those results come through and actually be reported to us is very important for us. We did note that there were quite a few people that had some documentation struggles early in the reduced monitoring period, and we've been very diligent from a staffing perspective to go through and find those disconnects and try to reach out to get those administratively corrected, things like a lead and copper rule number being incorrect, or an address being, typographically, mixed around. And we've been trying to get those resolved. The timeline for being able to resolve those is running out. So if that's something that's still pending with your water system, please make sure to get those revisions completed appropriately as directed by staff and in coordination with your laboratory. That also means that if you have your results, now is the time to be performing your lead consumer notices. So please make sure that you're getting those done and submitting at least one representative copy along with the certification to our lead and copper group. All of those submissions can be done electronically now, so you can send those to pwslcr@tceq.texas.gov, and we'll be able to take those in and get those noted to your system. That's also something you can check on in Drinking Water Watch to make sure that that schedule has been closed out. If you have any questions about how to do that, feel free to reach out to us. We'll be glad to walk you through it. Another item of concern is the disinfectant level quarterly operating report, or the DLQOR. It was once again due yesterday, but I did want to let everybody know that we have struggled in the past with the system not being up and not running because of overload. We have finally gotten to the bottom of that with our Information Resources Division, and for I think 3 reporting quarters now, we have not had any issues. So if before you were hesitant to use the online reporting system, and you are struggling in any way to get those in or to have the application up during the reporting period, we have now resolved that. So I would highly encourage you, if you were, in the past concerned about that, to go ahead and make the effort to try it again. Obviously, the reporting goes much faster if it's done electronically. The chances of a data entry error are not there, unless, of course, you yourself enter it incorrectly. And then we can get feedback to you a lot faster. So I would highly encourage you to look into our E2 system for the DLQOR. Once again, if you have any questions, reach out to us. In this case, for DLQOR, you'd be emailing dbp@tceq.texas.gov, and they'll be more than happy to walk you through that. We have a user guide. We have a way we can talk you through creating a steers account, all those types of items. Also, it's the end of the hottest period of the year, which means that unfortunately a ton of RTCR assessments were triggered. So if you are a water system that is in the process of performing an assessment and you need any sort of assistance, please let us know. But I did want to emphasize a few things. When we went back and analyzed our data for all the assessments that have been done in the last 2 years, actually, a significant portion of assessments were triggered because people didn't take their repeats and they didn't take their repeats on time. So I would very much encourage looking at your SOP and looking at your training to make sure that people are aware of how repeats should be collected, where they should be collected, and what the timelines for those repeats are. We have created a repeat page, which I'll go ahead and cut and paste into the chat so that you have it. But if by any chance you have new staff, or you have staff who they can't get a hold of their supervisor, they can feel free to check out this "What Do You Do When You Have a Positive" page. And we'll walk them through making sure that they understand how to take their repeats. If they are groundwater system, how they would take their triggered source monitoring, and also making sure the paperwork's right, because we always know that administratively, those are the kind of things that hold us back. So I would highly encourage you to check that out. And then also just making sure that your sample siting plan is current. We have regrettably seen some people have SSPs that have sites that are no longer a part of their system, people that have gotten their own private well, or who have been annexed into another water system, or who are no longer in service and closed for business. And those obviously are not representative of your system, which is the goal behind the revised total cola formula. So if you haven't checked out your SSP in a while, the winter months when things are hopefully colder and quieter might be a good time to give that a look again. And then one more thing I want to say from a chem perspective is drought. I'm sure Brittany will talk a lot more about drought than I will, but we are seeing a significant uptick in violations, and a lot of them can be attributed to drought constrained sources, and then drought concerns. Things like DVPs, if you can't flush because you're being very, very careful with the amount of water that you have, we're seeing people struggle with their DVPs. We're also seeing naturally occurring contaminant like arsenic and nitrite and fluoride become more prevalent because as there's less water in the aquifer and the same amount of the naturally occurring contaminant, those concentrations go up. And then some of you I know have chosen to and been very successful at controlling those volumes by blending, strategically. And you might have lost the ability to blend because you don't have the adequate, source that has good quality water. So if you are struggling with any of those problems and you need technical assistance, please feel free to reach out to our FMT group or to reach out to the compliance program of concern. And we'll be glad to talk through whether the FMT can help you, whether it might be a more complicated assistance that somebody like the top group could do, or if we can help you understand the chemistry behind what's going on and help you with a different strategy that might work even with drought constraints. And I'd really like to emphasize nitrification. So especially with people not flushing in the same way they had been, the ability to properly manage your chlorine residual and your chloramination ratios makes a huge difference. Regrettably, this year we've had nitrification occur in some places through the state at a level that led them to exceeding the nitrite MCL. That is meaning that things are way out of bounds. So using that nitrification action plan, having that nitrification action plan, knowing what your triggers are and taking those appropriate actions can hopefully absolutely keep you out of MCL territory, but then also ensure that you're not going to have other health-based issues and long-term issues related to DEPs. Then the final thing I want to put out there is thank you for those who attended the Public Drinking Water Conference. We had a lot of participation. We had great attendance in person. We had great attendance virtually. Great Q&A, especially for the items related to the lead and copper rule revisions. We had people really asking the questions, trying to get in there, giving us great feedback during our work group session. So I very much appreciate that. And I'd encourage you to keep up through the blog and then also through our stakeholder group later today related to the LCRR. And I did want to give you a heads up that very soon that video should be coming out to YouTube. So if you have a presentation you wanted to revisit, they should be there, or that you can share it with your staff. So unfortunately, I do apologize that some of the Q&A was not very easy to hear. We didn't have the microphones out in the audience in a way that caught the questions very well. And we've had to cut some of the videos. But if there's somebody that, you had a question, you wanted the answer, and the question had to get cut because we couldn't hear anything, please feel to reach back out to us. We'll be glad to answer that question again and make sure that you get the information that you need. Let me go ahead and pause. Let me see. I thought I saw something come up in the chat. There was one question about getting Drinking Water Watch updated. So I'm going to go ahead and pass along to my next presenter, Steven Sarenga. And he's actually sitting next to me. So we'll hook him up and he can tell you a little bit more about that.
Thank you, everybody. Having some computer difficulty. Seems to only happen when we're having DWAWG. I don't know why, but wanted to talk about a couple things, one of which was about the Public Drinking Water Conference, and let you all know that those videos were now actually up. I think they can be found by going to our main page, and then on the right-hand side, there's a TCQ news releases. Click on YouTube. Michelle's putting up another slide here in a moment. And YouTube playlists and the PDW conference playlist should be up there. There's 40 in total. And as Michelle said, if you find that there are answers that you didn't hear in the presentations or information that you needed, please feel free to reach out to the folks that were in those videos. This is a really significant thing to have those things on the website now, and we hope that we'll see you all using those so that we know that this is a worthwhile use of our investment. Michelle has also put up here a slide for our new emergency contacts update form. This is a new thing that we're doing this year. We'll be sending out letters, starting with systems on the coast. But really at any time, y'all can jump into this form and update your emergency contact information. Right now, it's limited to just emergency contacts. So if you all have other contacts that you need updated, you can send those to PWS InVen at tceq.texas.gov. If there's some delay in getting this updated, like Crystal's having, please feel free to give me a call or to shoot me an email, and we'll get those prioritized and get those entered. I definitely understand your concern there, Crystal, so we'll make sure those get updated. We are also in the midst of doing our CCR compliance, and just wanted to make y'all aware that we are working towards developing some new materials to help public water systems and consumers understand their CCR a little bit better. And so I would very much appreciate your feedback and insight on what would help explain the CCR better for customers. We know that you all get a lot of calls because we get a lot of calls. And so the more information that we can put out there that will help customers understand it, the better. So I very much appreciate your feedback. You can send that to me directly. My name is, my name is Stephen Swearinga, and my email is stephen.swearinga@tceq.gov. Those were my updates for today. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Okay. I would highly encourage y'all to get on that courtesy reminder system that Stephen has mentioned several times before. And I would especially say that because as we move forward, the listserv that you guys are being notified about drinking water, the DWAWG, the Drinking Water Advisory Work Group through, we're going to cease to use that. And we're going to use the courtesy reminder system instead. So now is the opportunity for you to get signed up and make sure that you're getting those through the courtesy reminder system, which is our long-term solution for communications with the regulated entities. Okay. Brittany, you are the next one I have for sharing. Do you want to give your sectional updates?
If I just say it from here, can you guys hear me?
They say yes. So,
Well, okay, I'll just talk loud then.
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, cool. So, if you can see me in the video, I'm here in the back of the room. I'm Brittany Wortham-Teeple, manager of the Emergency Preparedness and Response section. So I'll give a few updates starting with the emergency preparedness plans. We've received nearly 4,000 total submittals. So we appreciate everyone who has made a submittal thus far and those who are working with our reviewers when they have questions or recommendations regarding your EPP. And we appreciate your patience as we try to work through this wave of submittals. For those who did not submit an EPP on time, violations were mailed in July, and notices of enforcement have also started going out for those who didn't respond to the violation. If you received a violation or notice of enforcement and need help achieving compliance, please reach out to our program. We can help you directly or make an assistance assignment through our financial, managerial, and technical assistance contract to help you walk through the form. They will not do the EPP for you, but can help you sort through your information that you want to claim as an option for providing continuous operations during emergency situations. Also, if you're contacted by an EPP reviewer and are having a hard time just getting the EPP to an approvable place, again, I want to tout the FMT assistance option to help you sort through whatever information you may have that you're not maybe bringing to the front of your brain at the moment. But we'll also start sending out letters for requesting information officially soon. As always, if you have any questions about the program or any correspondence you receive from us, please send an email to pdwepp@tceq.texas.gov. So I also want to say that for preparing for severe weather, we are over the hump for like prime hurricane season. It doesn't mean that we won't get hit. It just means that it's less likely, right? But at this point, let's start thinking about preparing for those fall monsoons and even, dare I say, winter freezes, since we won't come back until January. Please make sure you are preparing, and this includes both physical and administrative prep. So please take a look at your operations plans, your monitoring plans, your emergency response plans, your EPPs. That would be valuable during the planning for a storm or in recovery of an event. We recommend making sure your system keeps the chemical storage facilities full, have backup parts available, otherwise protect other critical or sensitive equipment. For instance, if you're prone to flooding and your monitoring equipment is on the ground floor, but it can be lifted, let's evaluate how to lift that now. You know, you may also want to consider purchasing insulation in preparation for winter. So you don't, wait too long, there's a run on insulation and then they're sold out and you're out of luck. It's also a good idea to connect with your local emergency officials, like your county emergency management coordinator, your county judge, where possible, your electrical purveyor, all of those folks that will be helpful during an emergency event. I recommend developing a good rapport with these folks before the storm happens. Sorry, I just got an email that's covering my notes. And that way you'll have a direct line of communication already established when you may need to request assistance from one of those people. As Stephen mentioned earlier, they're sending out the emergency contact update forms, but there's also a way to do that on the internet. As far as emergencies are concerned, if we start calling out to water systems, and it's happened so many times before that people are like, I haven't worked for that system for 4 years. Please try to provide up-to-date emergency contact information so that if we need to reach out after a major event, we have the right person to call. It's very valuable for us for gauging impacts and offering assistance where it's most needed. If you're looking for a resource that can provide your water or wastewater utility assistance in recovering from these impacts as a result of any disaster, I recommend also considering joining TextWarn, which is the Texas Water and Wastewater Agency Response Network. It provides support and promotes statewide emergency preparedness, disaster response, mutual aid for public and private water and wastewater utilities. The services are free to all utilities in the state, both public and private systems of any kind. They provide members with emergency planning, response, and recovery information before, during, and after an emergency. TextWarn works closely with the TCEQ and the State Emergency Operations Center to coordinate responses to utilities impacted by disasters that need assistance in recovering in a reasonable length of time. But you have to join as a contributing member to TextWarn. And if you have any questions regarding TextWarn, their email is info@txwarn.org. So I do want to touch on drought a little bit. We did have a good run of rain and it helped us a little bit. Our state wasn't in that deep red on the drought monitor for a little while. We had some relief. But now I don't think it's rained for like 30 days again, at least in Central Texas. And the long range predictions suggest we will remain in La Nina pattern well into winter. So with that said, please make sure you are taking precautions to reduce your water use and also evaluating what long-term solutions may be viable for your system. Please make sure if you implement water restrictions that you submit information through the online drought reporting form. Not only is it required for retail public water supplies to notify us within 5 days of implementing this restriction, but it is very important for us to be aware of significant issues happening and if there are any specific areas struggling the hardest in the state. If you're running into water shortages or think you may have 180 days or less of available water, it is imperative that you report that up to us before, the day you think you're going to run out of water. Like, surprise for dry. So we can refer you for assistance and help you evaluate your options for sources, including for funding to help you get out of your pickle. If you have questions about drought contingency itself, that program is housed in the water availability division, but we can also try to help make connections where needed. All right, last but not least, as a reminder, please be aware the next Texas Water, if you're looking for funding, the Texas Water Infrastructure Coordination Committee, or TWIC, is a group of state and federal assistance agencies who meet periodically, discuss water system needs and projects that need funding. The next TWIC is tentatively scheduled for November 16th. If you have questions relating to TWIC, please contact Dorothy Young, which is dorothy.young@tcep.texas.gov. And please remember that you can always request technical assistance through the Financial, Managerial, and Technical Assistance Program at the email fmt@tcep.texas.gov. If you also need assistance, and you can just reach out to us at the main line at 512-239-4691. Ask for someone in the emergency preparedness and response section that you want to talk about some technical assistance, and we can triage your needs to see what our best path forward is. But please maintain that line of communication with us, because we are always here and available and happy to help. We just need to know that you need it. That's it. Now I've probably blown out the eardrums of everybody in the room. So I'll stop.
Thank you. Anybody have questions for Britt before we move on? Okay. I had one more announcement that wasn't necessarily sectional related, but is important for everyone. So in the last few months, we've experienced an unfortunate number of people reporting emergent or emergency events through our email proxy boxes. We are finding that is not the appropriate way to be notified of something that's a now issue, something that needs to be addressed immediately. We've tried to alleviate that by updating our auto replies and specifically tell people this is not for emergency purposes. You should contact your region. You should call this number. So what I want to do is make sure that everybody knows, if you were to have an emergency situation, the number one thing to do would be to reach out to your regional representative. On our website, if you just put what is my region, there is an application that will show you your county. You can click on your county, it'll tell you which region, and it'll also be able to kick you down to what their contact number is. So priority number one would be to go ahead and let your region know, because depending on the situation, they are the boots on the ground that can come and help you faster than anybody in the water supply division can. If it's going to be something that we need to provide technical assistance on or additional help on, we will obviously do that through coordination with the region. And there's also an after hours number that if by any chance your regional office is not available, we have a 24-hour staff line that can do that. And I'll go ahead and show you all real quick just like what our landing page looks like. So that way you have kind of an idea of what you'd be looking for. So we've tried to make this sorry, make sure I'm sharing the right screen. So if you were to go to our web pages in this top right-hand corner here, you can see that underneath our proxy box, so in this case, anything that's directly related to public drinking water goes to the main PDWS proxy box. Underneath it, if you need to emergency report something, it's going to give you a link that sends you to the regional office locating tool or the after hours emergency line. So if by any chance you have people who, we all have new staff right now. If you have new staff and they're struggling, they know they need to tell somebody, but they don't know how, hopefully this is a tool that shows them how to reach us and how to get in touch with us. So please feel free to share that around and also make sure that your policies and your procedures are out there where they know, okay, if something goes wrong, hopefully, contact a supervisor, contact whatever, but if the decision is made that TCEQ should be brought in the loop, it's a reportable type of situation, please make sure that you are reaching out to your regional office or the after hours line as is appropriate. All right. Also, just as a reminder, if you have something that's emergent, like for instance, you have a positive BACT, I shared the positive total coliform website earlier. We have information in there about who to contact related to that program. If you have a boil water notice and you need to take steps related to boil water notice, there's a boil water notice contact capability. And then there's also, for instance, if you are having a unique situation related to the surface water treatment rule and RG 211 tells you to reach out to us, please make sure that you're doing that. If by any chance you cannot reach us at the main line number, then you can use those emergency lines that you're seeing on the webpage and that are shown as a bounce back on our email addresses. Does anybody have questions, concerns on that or any other items that we've covered in the, oh, yes, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Alfonso with the City of Dallas Water Department. What are your comment on updating the sample siting plans, the new locations? Ask before meeting. Is it okay still to send quarterly updates? Really a lot of changes actually sending updates.
Right, so, yes, you can update it. It's a living document. You should keep it up to date. Our main concern from a programmatic perspective is making sure that, you know, if an incident were to occur that required an assessment or a deeper dive into your repeats, that you would be able to produce an updated or current copy. So, if quarterly works for you, quarterly works for us. Unless, of course, you know, you just did a quarterly reporting and then you made an update and that resulted in, you know, some sort of situation where we needed your most current, then we'd ask for it at that point. Okay?
My concern is only that samples and sites that are not listed in the sample siting plan, but they'll be the next quarterly update. To make those changes, you need to wait for us to approve it before the sample.
We do not approve them. It's for our own knowledge. The only time that we would basically say that you couldn't use it is if it was non-representative. So as long as you're following those rules and guidelines related to representativeness, just maintain a current living copy and be ready to produce one if the need arises. I believe there's a caveat in the rule that says we could ask you for it, you'd have to provide it. Okay.
Are you updating, excuse me, are you updating as you go, or you know, once a quarter you're looking at it and you're up?
No, we update as we go.
Yeah.
We have a lot of sites that get.
Yeah, understood.
But at least for me,
Yeah, that's fine. That's good.
My apologies. The chat indicated that they couldn't hear the question. And so Alfonso wanted to know that they are always updating their sample siting plan. And is it something that they can produce to us on a quarterly basis? And like I said, the answer is really about producing it, making sure that it's current and a living document for you, and then producing it as needed by the program areas. Quarterly is a perfectly fine time, unless of course we have a triggering event that asks for it then, and then you would just need to be able to produce the most current at the time of request. So my apologies, I didn't see that until a second ago. All right, any other questions or concerns before we move on to the next item area? Okay, all right, then we will take a second here to get situated, and our first presenter Mr. Seth Kramer talking to us about the lead testing in school and child care program.
Sorry about that.
Start from scratch.
Okay,
everybody.
let's get Seth started back at the beginning. Sorry about that,
Let's
Seth.
start over again. Again, you know, I have an opportunity here today, and I have the privilege to be here to talk with the water system community again about a program that's it's a non-regulatory program. I won't be talking about forms that you have to fill out or enforcement actions or any violations. I'll be talking to you about a community-based program that is created here for school and child care facilities here in the state of Texas. And we call it the lead testing in school and child care program. So with that, I'll go ahead and get us started. So what does this program offer? This program, it's a program to help K through 12 schools and regulated childcare facilities reduce exposure to lead in drinking water. With this program and through the program, participants are trained to collect their samples, test their drinking water for lead, and we help them take action to reduce lead in drinking water. This program is completely free to any school or childcare facility that participates in it. All of the materials and instructions are included, and we deliver them directly to them. This is either done through email mostly, and then the sample kits are sent to them through the mail with prepaid shipping labels that they can use to send them to the lab for analysis. So with just some basic training and our online trainings, members of their staff can collect these samples. So just a little bit about the funding and guidance. This support is made possible by the United States Environmental Protection Agency, specifically through the Water Infrastructure Improvements for the Nation Act, Section 2107. And this program guidance is based on the EPA's 3 Ts for reducing lead in drinking water at schools and childcare facilities. That's a training, testing, and taking action approach to reducing lead in drinking water. All of this information is also available on our website if you want to look into it more. And so with that, one of the greatest resources we have for you to learn more and to share, if you would like, with your school and childcare community is the www.texasleadtesting.org. Now that URL will redirect you back to our program's webpage where you can view results. You can nominate a school or childcare facility in your area, and the school or childcare facility would be able to enroll. We also have a series of frequently asked questions and other information that would pretty much answer anything that you would need to know. Additionally, all contact information for either us here at the TCEQ or most importantly, our program provider would be available to answer any questions you would have about the program. So program enrollment is fairly simple. We do have an online form that's available for potential participants. The online form tells them everything that they'll need on the first page to fill it out. Additionally, also that information is on the frequently asked questions page on the web page. For anyone who wants to enroll multiple numbers of facilities, we do have the ability to batch enroll. So if a district wants to enroll an entire district of schools, we can have them get in touch with our program provider, and they will send you a spreadsheet so you'll be able to enroll multiple schools at once. Once someone is enrolled in the program, our program provider creates an account for them. They'll go ahead and they'll log themselves in, and this is an online portal where they can view their results and the steps of their program. And so also if you happen to have someone like a school district that's overseeing multiple sites, we also in the portal have the ability for them to be able to view all of those sites under one user login. And so this is kind of a little bit of a sample of kind of how it tracks their progress and tells them what steps they've done in this particular situation. The next step for this program is to collect samples and get it off to a laboratory for analysis. So just generally overall, the program activities that can be expected for any of the participants, they're going to do some general program training. That training is going to talk to them about how to get on the online portal, teaches them about the source of lead, health effects of lead, a little bit of how they can reduce exposure to lead in their drinking water. And then we also provide them the support they need to notify their community of the sampling event. And we also have sample collector training. All of these are maybe about 10 minutes at most each, any of these trainings, the programmatic training and the sample collector training. The collector training has online videos available that are very nicely done for sample collection. And then when it comes to testing, we have the ability for people to walk around with a phone or a tablet and complete their outlet inventory using that phone or tablet. They can take pictures of the site that they're going to inventory. It automatically generates sample site IDs for them, just really makes it streamlined and simple for them to do. Once that outlet inventory is complete, the sample collectors have been trained. They'll be able to collect those samples. And again, they'll be able to ship those back in the same box of bottles that we mailed to them that will go back to the laboratory for analysis. One of the benefits, just to mention, is that this program does collect samples under an EPA-approved quality assurance project plan. And so the effort we put into assuring that data quality is there for every one of the participants in this program. Once the results come back, we move into the taking action with the 3 Ts, where our program provider will be there with customer service helplines available from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. Central Time. They'll be there to help interpret results. They'll be there to help communicate those results to the community again, and also help with deciding on what control measures you may want to implement in order to reduce the lead in drinking water in their school or childcare facility. So with that, again, really, this was just an opportunity for me to plug this program here to all of you in the public water system community. If you like what you saw today, you're at all interested, you can get involved by sharing this opportunity with your school or childcare community. If you'd like to get even more involved, you can offer to assist them with outlet inventory, with sample collection, or anything else that they'd be willing to help you assist or allow you to assist with. We would greatly appreciate it here if you spread this word. We are currently calling out about 300 school and childcare facilities a week right now. We'll be continuing to do that for about the next year and a half. At that point, we'll have covered over 20,000 of the eligible school and childcare facilities here in the state. So right now across the state, someone in your service area might very well be participating in the program or getting ready to get a phone call. If you would like to go ahead and spread this word, maybe create some goodwill between the school and childcare community that you have in your service area, we greatly appreciate that. And our program provider or myself will do anything we can to assist you or help you do that if you would like. So please feel free to get involved if you would like. And with that, then I'll provide you some contact information and just thank you for your time here and the opportunity to introduce this program to you all. Michelle?
So if you had a couple of questions, so I want to go ahead and go through the questions.
Sure.
The first one was, how many children must you serve before you're considered a daycare? And really, it's about being licensed or registered. Is that right?
It's about being a regulated childcare facility through childcare licensing through the Health and Human Services, Texas Health and Human Services. So in terms of what would qualify you as someone who needs licensing and regulation, I'd have to send you to the Texas Health and Human Service Commission and their childcare licensing. Feel free to send me an email at the ltscc@tceq.texas.gov address there. I'll be more than happy to put you in contact with the person I know that oversees childcare licensing.
Okay. Another question was, how many facilities to date? I know that it's changing every moment, but several hundred at this point?
It is over a couple hundred at this point, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just so everybody knows, like, that is literally something that can change any moment because they're going on themselves, they're registering themselves. We check to make sure that they are valid and eligible, click them to approve them, and they just keep on moving through the system. So that is something that we're glad to know is happening and is growing on a moment basis. The next item is rule related. So Seth, if you don't mind, I'll go ahead and take it. It asks, can the results from the participating facility in our service area be used for the LCRRI? The LCRI doesn't exist yet, so I don't know what will be allowable under that. Based on the current LCRR proposed language that's currently effective, no, it would not be something that could be used at this point in time. However, EPA has indicated they're expecting to make some changes related to that, so I suggest we all kind of hang back, see what they decide, and we'll give you updates as soon as they make a decision. Then we'll let you guys know what that is. Either way, I do want to point out that this is something that could be very beneficial to public water systems, because if the LCRR continues forward in the way that it needs to, where 20% of water systems or 20% of schools and childcare served by the public water system must be tested each year. If nothing else, this gets them, the schools and the childcares, aware of what's going on in their own system. They're going to have the training, so when you approach them, it's not something new and scary to them. They know what's going on. They know what the education is. They already, by this program, they're required to give education about what lead is to their served community. So once again, it's not going to be the first time the served community will hear about it. And then once they go through our program, they're also receiving a recommended action plan. They already kind of know the kind of things that can be done about a higher lead level. So by them being trained by us, testing through us, and taking action with us, that makes your interfacing with them simpler, easier, and you're working with an informed consumer instead of somebody you're approaching just completely cold turkey. So that's part of why I want to make sure I put this out there to you guys now is yes, it's non-regulatory. Yes, this does not apply to you directly as a public water system, but it can really help you out in the end because you're going to have that educational opportunity. You're going to have that interaction with people and bring them up to a level where they are aware of what's going on. They are more buy-in, and it should make your job easier down the road. Let's see. Usually home percentage and passive culture. Okay. Those were all the existing questions. So thank you very much, Seth. I appreciate it. And we're just about on time. So let me go ahead and see if our next speaker is available, and we'll be right back with you.
Great, thanks for the opportunity, Michelle. Thanks for everyone out there listening.
So there is a question of that can certain labs do the testing for the lead and copper in schools? DT, I can tell you right now that under this existing program with the voluntary, that is through a singular laboratory because of the quality assurance project plan associated to it. And the fact that it's handled through a centralized program, it is not something that they can choose their own laboratory. So under the current program, no, it is not open to other folks. However, bear in mind, under the lead and copper rule revisions, that's a completely separate program and is still up for determination as how EPA chooses to move forward with that. That was the last question I had on here, so go ahead and check. Mark Wyatt with the Texas Water Development Board, are you on the line? I'm not seeing him currently, so let me go ahead and see if I can get him in. I did want to mention a few things related to funding before we get to this next group, which is funding related presenters. So one of the main questions that came up to us through the one of the recurrent themes that came up during the Public Drinking Water Conference was, how are we going to pay for this? And as I unfortunately say pretty regularly, the rules don't tell you who pays for anything. So I wanted to go ahead, excuse me. To go ahead and let you know that we've been looking around to see what options are available, and the EPA has actually put together a pretty good brochure, which I'll share in the chat here. I didn't want to print a bunch of copies because it's 24 pages of fun, but it's called Funding and Technical Resources for Lead Service Line Replacement in Small and Disadvantaged Communities. And what it does is it calls out different federal funding sources that are available. Everything from the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, which hopefully the Texas Water Development Board will be here to speak with us about. Also, the Water Infrastructure and Improvement for the Nation Act, which is part of the funding that funds SETS program. All of this is a different branch of that funding. The WIFIA program, Healthy Communities. So there are lots of things that are available through the USDA, the Community Development Block Grants through HUD, the Healthy Homes programs, and water infrastructure and resiliency funds that are potential funding sources for activities that you need as a public water system to do any improvements, any replacements, but also there are some opportunities for your homeowners. If your homeowners are potentially struggling to do a lead service line replacement if they need it, then we also have Alan Lambright here coming up at 10:30 to discuss the potential for funding through the USDA on the private side of the line. We'll go ahead and check and see if we've had Mark join us. My apologies for the issue. It turns out that Mark is out of the office on a family emergency today, so he will not be able to join us. So we'll go ahead and move on to our next presenter, who is Mr. Alan Lambright with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, to talk to us with some funding possibilities about the private side replacement and his grant areas. Alan, take the floor at your convenience.
Well, thank you for the invite. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with y'all today and hopefully work with you all as we solve some problems in Texas. So I think many of y'all are familiar with our water and waste program that we use to finance the public infrastructure. But I come to you today as our housing program director for the state to talk about a couple of programs that we can potentially help from the meter to the house, may be able to assist. So I think, Michelle, you have me scheduled for 30 minutes, and I'm going to give y'all a bunch of that time back today, and we'll just hit the 60,000 foot overview of two programs that I think would potentially fit. And then anybody that has any questions, or we can figure out kind of a way ahead on how to help some individual communities. But to me, the easy one that is potentially available is what we refer to as our Section 504 repair loan and grant program. Now, our program here is going to be restricted to rural areas and rural towns, and we have a website out there that somebody can type in their address and figure out if they're eligible or not. But typically we say a community less than 10,000 in population is eligible. As we get closer to the metropolitan areas, the Dallases, Houstons, San Antonios, Austins, etc., that line becomes a little blurred. But if we're in far west Texas, we can really utilize that 10,000 or less number and be eligible. But what can we use those funds for? Anything that would be considered a health or safety issue. So obviously lead in the pipe is going to be considered a health or a safety issue. So we could do any repair needed. I mentioned loan, I mentioned grant. Maximum loan that we can do is 20,000. And we actually have some abilities to go to 40,000, and the current maximum grant is $10,000. Now that's a lifetime grant to the family versus a for each individual event. So we do track it by the house. One other kind of caveat to the grant program is that we can't leave other major health and safety issues. So if they also have a hole in their roof, we would have to fix that issue also in order for the grant, for them to be eligible for the grant. But we'll handle all that piece as we dig into eligibility. Also, to be grant eligible, they have to be over 62. To both for our 504 loan and grant program, they have to be considered very low income. We use the HUD 203B income limits, real similar to any other government program out there. They're going to be identical rates or income limits for that. If we do have to get involved in a loan, if we stay under $7,500 in loan, we don't take a lien on their property. We do that up to 20 years, so the rate in term is really affordable, 1% interest on the loan. We don't have a deadline, so to speak, of when to apply. Just like any other federal program, state-funded program, we do have some times of year that are better to apply than others. Right now, I couldn't fund a project if I had to, but here in about 3 weeks, we'll get our 2023 allocation and we'll be rolling along in that program again. how long does it take to get funding? Typically in most of our offices, we're going to be at a 30, 45 day time frame from the time we get an application to the time we fund it, and a couple of weeks to get it closed. So we try to move them along fairly rapidly. So again, there's 100,000-foot overview of that program. See one question in the chat about a fact sheet, and yes, I'll get a fact sheet over to Michelle, and she can get it distributed to everybody if that's a acceptable way to get that information disseminated.
Yeah, that should be no problem.
So I'll get those to you after this call. So the other program that might be eligible, and I think this one would probably take a little bit more work on our part, but it's a program that we call a housing preservation grant. In that program, we provide a lump sum to either an entity, or we can even do it to a community, and then they in turn grant the funds out within their community. This year in Texas, average grant size was around $250,000. And then how they in turn, re-grant that money out in their community, I would say the average is going to be about $20,000 a home. So average entity would be helping, 10 to 15 homes with their grant. Certainly can be structured a lot of different ways. Now, the 504 program, I won't say we have unlimited money, but we could have spent a lot more money had we had the applications to spend that money. This housing preservation grant money, they initially compete within Texas. And then if we have more applications than we have funds, then they would compete nationwide for any excess money that other states did not use. We were very successful in fiscal year 2022 funding out of our state allocation. We funded about 1.1 million in grants to eligible entities, and then we were able to get about another 1.5 million in funds from what we call the National Office Pool. So about 2.6 million total that we funded in that housing preservation grant program. But it is a little more competitive program. But would certainly entertain more applications and certainly have a great shot of getting them funded. We funded 100% of the eligible entities this year, so which was a total of 10, ranging from a $35,000 grant to a $500,000 grant, and everywhere in between. So we could certainly work with a community to put an application together if it made sense for that community. The best part to me about that program in a community applying my 504 program, again, I'm restricted to very low income individuals. The housing preservation grant program, they could set up their parameters so it could be low or very low income families that would be eligible for assistance. So they could actually do some good with some families that we couldn't touch with our 504 program. Now's really kind of a good time to start prepping for the fiscal year 2023 notice of solicitation of applications, which will probably come around June of 2023 is when we'll start seeing that hit the Federal Register. But my experience shows if they don't start planning in advance, it's going to be difficult to put that application together during the application window. So, and I'll provide a fact sheet on this one too. So, Again, really high level talk on each one of those programs. If you have communities that you know would be interested, we can certainly get down the weeds a little bit more with the individual community. We have 26 offices across the state, 25 field offices, and then our state office in Temple. And we can provide some more one-on-one assistance within that community, get the applications in the right hands, or send them directly to the homeowner if that's what we need to do. Be happy to take any questions. Otherwise, I'll give you back a whole lot of the 30 minutes I was allocated. So.
I do see that there is a hand up for
Okay.
Alan Leonard. Alan, would you like to go ahead and ask your question?
That was a mistake. My apologies.
Okay, not a problem. And Alan Lambright, yes, if you are able to provide the fact sheet about the 504 program and also about the Housing Preservation Grant Program, I'll be able to share them out through this forum and make sure that people have that information, and then also your contact information as well to potentially get additional grants out there to the people as we find lines. Anybody here in the meeting have any questions they want to put out? Okay. Well, then thank you very much for joining us, Ellen. I appreciate it, especially for your flexibility as we found somebody at Texas Water Development Board to give us a rundown. Our originally scheduled speaker was Mr. Mark Wyatt, but he is out of the office on a family emergency today. Heather O'Keefe with the Texas Water Development Board has been able to hop on. And Heather, if you are feeling comfortable, if you could give us just a brief rundown of the DWSRF and how people would go about determining their eligibility and application, that would be greatly appreciated.
Okay, good morning. My name's Heather O'Keefe. I'm the drinking water program coordinator at the Water Development Board. And as far as accessing the funds under the state revolving fund, you would start with submitting a project information form. If your system needs, water improvements, distribution lines, upgrades, things like that, those are eligible projects. We also post our intended use plan, which I call kind of like the funding Bible. It says everything, who's eligible, what projects are eligible, the different funding allocations, the disadvantage, how would you become disadvantaged or what that calculation would look like. So that's definitely a good place to start. And that's on our website. I can send that over. But anyway, you'd start with a project information form. And we usually we send out a request for solicitation around December. So in a couple months, we'll be posting that you can submit your project information forms. That will be a summary of your project. Usually, if it's over 500,000 or 100,000, you will need an engineer, a professional engineer, to stamp off on your estimated costs. And if you're requesting disadvantaged eligibility, there's a separate worksheet you would submit for that. So those are usually due beginning of March. And the reason I don't have any specific deadlines right now is we're a little off on our timeline this year because, of the IIJA money, it took a little while to get our intended use plan for 2023 finalized. It was just finalized October 5th or approved by the board. So I don't know if we're going to be pushing back any deadlines right now, but generally the solicitation for project information forms, which we call PIFs, is December. Deadline is around March. And that's when we will review, that's when we'll start reviewing those project information forms. That takes a few months. TCEQ assists in scoring for the drinking water PIFs. We'll do a disadvantaged review, and so to determine whether you're disadvantaged, a disadvantaged community, that means that, oh, thank you, James. I think you just posted on there. Great, thank you. to see if you are a disadvantaged community, that means that it's based on the state annual median household income, and you have to be 75% of that. So each year that changes. And it's when you do the online application, it's great. You can put in your numbers, which you'll get from the census data. And you put those numbers in, your annual median household income, your unemployment rate, water rates, and all that goes into calculating whether you are a disadvantaged community. If you are a disadvantaged community, that's when we have principal forgiveness available. We don't use the word grant, but that's basically what it is. So this year for 2023, everyone who is a disadvantaged community, when we invite them, they can receive up to 70% of their estimated costs or project costs. Those will be forgiven. That will be considered the principal forgiveness component of the loan. So it's a great opportunity for disadvantaged communities to get a big chunk of that loan classified as principal forgiveness, which you don't have to pay back. We also have other pots of or allocations of funds under the SRF where you can get principal forgiveness if you're a very small system. Oh, hello, Bill. If you are a very small system, which means you're 1,000 or less, there's principal forgiveness under that. We also have, if you want to prepare an emergency preparedness plan, there's principal forgiveness funds for that. So there's just different pots of money, but I do know that the big chunk of what people are looking for is those disadvantaged funds, but you do have to qualify for that. Let's see, what else? So basically you submit your PIF. By March, we review, we rate and rank those project information forms based on disadvantaged eligibility. There's rating criteria, like say there's, let's say you have an enforcement action, you have notices of violation, boil water notices, you have contaminants in your water, arsenic, things like that. Those are all considered. You'll be scored and ranked, and then we send out invitation letters, which we are in the process of doing right now, for those who are basically top ranked. And that list comes out, which it just came out. We just posted it to our website. So the 2023 list is out, and that will include by rank, alphabetical, like all the projects, and then also the invited list. And then you're invited. You do not have to submit an application. I mean, sometimes entities just want to see where they fall. But we will send out an invitation, and you can submit an intent to apply back to us saying, yes, we would like to submit an application. And then there'll be a deadline for that. And you'll submit your application. It'll go under review, and then the regional teams deal with that. So Bill has a question about the lead service line inventory. Pay for private segment of the service to be replaced. We are still working on that, the lead service line funds. That there will be a separate intended use plan for that. So right now, our intended use plan covers our general appropriations plus the general funds from the IIJA, and then there will be a separate IUP for lead service line. And we don't have that up right now. And Bill, I just can't answer that question. I don't know. I don't have enough details on that. If a system is in compliance and planning appropriately. So then Tina has a question. Is it even worth submitting if a system is in compliance and planning appropriately for upgrades, rehabs before failure? That's a good question. So the SRF really does tend to assist those systems that are in non-compliance and have a lot of issues and are disadvantaged. Those are the ones that rank high. Now, if you are in compliance, if you are not disadvantaged, your scoring won't be as high. And so potentially you would possibly be eligible for like loan only. But the further down you are on that list, our project priority list, the least likely we could get to you before we run out of funds. You know what I mean? So, I mean, if you don't know where you rank, I think it would behoove you to submit a project information form. You know, that's all I can say to that. From Ashley Kent, will the funding set aside for lead follow the same? Yes. So it's going to be the same process as how we conduct the SRF process in general. So the IUP for the lead service line will be drafted. It will be approved by the board. We'll have an invited list. We'll send those invites out. It's going to follow the same process. Also from Alan. Okay.
I think we have a question here from Stacy.
Oh, yeah. When will you specifically be soliciting for lead service line replacement projects? I don't have an answer for that right now.
So Heather, reason why I'm asking is I'm sure you're aware, but it's one of those where, and I know you're caught kind of flat-foot with this with Mark being out, but what it comes down to is we've submitted for clients and have other clients that have submitted lead projects that are on the current list that was just approved. Of course, they don't rank as well. They don't, they're lower ranking compared to the other projects on there. So what we've been waiting for is to find out when there's going to be this solicitation that's going to be specific to lead service lines. And I guess the other question with that is, I know you were talking more about the general program. Are you intending to do a separate solicitation for your lead service line projects, or will they be essentially delayed and lumped into next year's intended use plan? It sounds like you guys plan to do a separate intended use plan for them. So I'm just trying to get a handle on that because we do have projects that I think are interested, and we just want to be prepared to help them submit a new PIF if they need to, or just work with you to move the PIF over from the regular list onto this new list.
There will be a separate solicitation for it. That's my understanding right now. This is what's been talked about this whole time, is that there will be a separate IUP for lead service line, a separate IUP for the emerging contaminants, and those would be separate solicitations. This is my understanding at the present moment for that. So I know we have rollover, processes. I'm not 100% sure on how that would work. I don't know if you're like, well, we submitted for 2023. This had lead service line components, and can we just roll it over to, this new solicitation? I'm not 100% sure on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry. I know y'all want to know about lead service lines. I know there's a compliance deadline. Michelle brought it up in, oh gosh, was that the TWIC meeting? And I let, management know, like, this is being discussed. It's Bill has brought it up before. We just don't have answers right now on when the IUP is going to come out, when the solicitations are going to come out specifically for lead service line replacement.
Thank you very much. And just as a note to everybody here and then everybody joining us online, I did go to speak with the TWIC, Texas Water Infrastructure Coordination Council Committee, whichever one it is. And they do have a lot of programs. And like I mentioned with this 24-page guidance, there's basically a state equivalent of basically all of these types of funding. And we are going to be working with them to put together a brochure that will point you to the state equivalent of these fundings. So that's something that we're going to be working towards in the future, as hopefully a resource for you as we get deeper into things. Obviously, just like Heather said, we are waiting to know. Just like you were waiting to see whether the LCRR sticks or what changes with the LCRI, we're in the same situation. But it doesn't mean that you can't find a lead service line and want to replace it now. And we are also trying to work with the Texas Water Development Board to get them the information about people who have said that they found something. So that's a good way to have a lead list for them and potential actual projects. So as you go through, if you find any sort of lead fittings, lead service lines, please be sure to report that into our public water system lead and copper rule program through your material site survey and selection forms. Because that report is something that we'll be continually communicating with them about. And that way, as they develop their IUP, they'll have an idea of who to include on the invite list because you're a good candidate. So we'll continue to work with them. We'll continue to try and get you resources that are much more Texas state appropriate. Like I said, hopefully have additional people to come talk to you about funding options as they become available. And thank you very much, Heather. I know this was extremely short notice for you. But hopefully that gives people a really high overview of how to understand the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. I will share some links here in the side about how to go through and what kind of case studies are available that have taken advantage of these types of funding in the past and really just work towards, okay, well, here's what we need to do from a compliance perspective, but how are we going to pay for it? And hopefully try to help you answer that question because that's not a question we typically deal with that much at the TCEQ. So before we allow Heather to go, which once again, thank you very much for coming on at such short notice. Any other questions or concerns or thoughts that we'd like to be able to hit her on? All right. Well, then thank you very much. And thank you to Alan for joining us as well. He did provide the two fact sheets for the 504 home repair grant program and also the community housing preservation program that I've shared in the chat. I'll also take the PDF versions of those and we'll post them on the DWAWG website so you can come back at a later date and be able to access those. All right. I know we've kind of had a break, so if you guys are cool to move forward, I'll go ahead and roll into the last portion of our morning agenda, which is going to be an overview and discussion of EPA's guidance for developing and maintaining a service line inventory. If anybody objects or needs a break, please raise your hand or throw it in the chat right now. And if not, we'll just keep moving forward. All right. Okay. So I want to go super high level and just do a quick intro for any of those people who by some odd chance have not already made themselves, aware of the guidance, and make sure that we can kind of give just a super duper high level of what it includes. And then we will spend some time going ahead and getting that some discussion about it for you guys. So just as a recap from our earlier discussion, what you're seeing now are some funding options for LCRR. Once again, this is a PowerPoint that will eventually go up on our website. And this first link that you're seeing here about main funding sources is going to be a funding guide that EPA put together several years ago on funding for lead service line replacements. And it's very similar to the LCR specific guideline that I talked to you about earlier. And that second link is the LCR specific funding sources. And that, like I said, that's really focusing on small and disadvantaged communities, whereas the first guidance is focusing on all communities. So these are just resource links for you to be able to get back to those resources. As far as the guidance goes, so on August the 4th, EPA put out their guidance for developing and maintaining a service line inventory. That first link there will get you to that guidance. It is a PDF, it's posted, you can get to it at any point in time. If you print it, it's about 120 pages of fun. And I would highly recommend color because it has some good pictures in it. And then also right below that, the second resource you're going to see is EPA's webpage that includes the guide and the template. The template is an appendix within that greater guidance. And that webpage includes a little bit of background and intent and kind of gives you an idea of LCRI and what's coming. That might be some of the latest and greatest that EPA has given us. So overview of the guidance. Chapter 1, surprise, surprise, is an introduction. A lot of this is talking to you about the intent of the guidance and what they're hoping you will get out of it. And kind of where they're coming from on this, other states that have already done similar programs, and the fact that they're using, that group think, as well as some white papers that were written by the Association of State Drinking Water Administrators to move this guidance forward for y'all. Chapter 2 is talking about the elements of the inventory, being very specific about the things that are required and also helping to make sure that you understand the categories that are allowable by rule. And I want to emphasize that they are making sure to let you know that unknown is an acceptable category. Unknown is a category that is recognized, and indicating unknown on initial inventory is a perfectly reasonable thing to do, and it's right in line with the requirements. Chapter 3 is going to be talking about inventory planning, and that's going to include making sure you have a way of going about doing it. What is your plan? Once you've read through this guidance, where are you going to start? And who's going to be responsible for it, and making sure you can recruit any partners possible to help you in this endeavor. Historical record review is going to be the next chapter, and I really want to emphasize that one. It's got an asterisk next to it, and the reasoning behind that is this is an actual rule requirement. You cannot skip the records review. It is absolutely something that absolutely is required. You must look at every single type of record it indicates based on the CFR to get to that initial inventory. If you look at those records that are required and you get to an unknown, that's a perfectly reasonable categorization. But you cannot skip the record review. It's an actual rule requirement. This is also something that I'm asking because we've had quite a few people reach out to say that they want to start, investigating before they actually do their record review. And that's what the next chapter is about, service line investigation methods. And they're very clearly aligned in the service line investigation methods introductory paragraph in this guidance. That states this is not required under the lead and copper rule revisions. Investigative methods are not required. Historical review is. So anything that shows up in that investigative methods section is going to be a next step. It's going to be a due diligence. It's going to be something that eventually you'll need to get to understand your inventory, but it is not a requirement of the initial inventory under the lead and copper rule based on what EPA wrote in their guidance. It's in, like I said, the first paragraph. There's a very specific sentence there that says that it is not a requirement. There's also developing and updating the inventory, which is going to take you through how you can get to the point that you develop, looking at things like the template, which we're going to try and help you help get a TCEQ or Texas specific template across to you, so you have somewhere to start. But you still have to figure out how to get the data that's going to go into that inventory template. So it's also discussing how you're going to go about doing that. And then also, what's the process for updating that inventory? Obviously there's the rule requirement of always doing it each time you have to sample, unless you sample every 6 months. And in that case, you only have to do it annually. So there's those rule baseline requirements, but then there's the good practices, the best management practice. And that chapter really discusses those. The next chapter is talking about public accessibility and things like making sure that you have that inventory out as required by rule, that it is publicly accessible, how to share it to the web, and how other states and cities have done that, and the things you can choose to do or choose not to do and still meet those rule minimum requirements, as well as discussion about the consumer confidence rule and the transparency requirements related to that. And then, of course, the last chapter is references and appendices. One of those appendices is the actual template that they've put forth. That gives you references to other state programs. You can check out their websites, check out what they've done. Some of the northeastern states have had, a lot more of this on their plate before us. They're further down the line on the timeline. They've just had more time to develop. And then there are other appendices like the lead ban dates and information about how to do verification using your records and the records of your customers to move forward. One more thing I want to point out about this guidance, just at a high level, is that EPA went through and tried to bullet out those things that were actually required versus those things that are recommended. This is a guidance, not a rule. So things that are required, they tried to bullet out for you. I'd really recommend looking at those things that are required and making sure that those are the minimums you're hitting. Whereas a recommendation is that it's a recommendation, the best practice. It's something you can do, but it's not something that has to be done under the rule. They make a bulleted, basically, section in each chapter that tells you what is not required under the lead and copper. So super duper high level overview. I'm sure that quite a few have already been in the trenches and read through the whole thing. So I kind of want to open it up and see if there are any items people want to put out into ether and discuss, or potentially have questions about.
Yeah.
We've attended some webinars and things like that.
Historical
Yeah.
records.
What if those records are not available So, the guidance will tell you that you need to make an effort to find them. And bear in mind that the Texas Administrative Code gives you record retention requirements for quite a few different types of records. There's records you should have. If by any chance you don't have them available, then you're gonna have to document that and document basically why and how. In the guidance, it also gives you information about the documentation that EPA would expect to see. I can't guarantee that that's what TCEQ will want to see. This is their guidance, not ours. But it does make recommendations of what you would need to have to document those. Sharon, you say like with MUDs, lots of those documents are not kept in perpetuity. Remember that the record keeping guidelines in Texas Administrative Code are as a water system, regardless of whether your structure is a district or whether your structure is a municipality or whether you are an investor-owned utility. So if there are things that say that you need to keep them, so many years after their existence or after they are made obsolete, make sure that you're following those guidelines. Obviously, you can't go back and create a historic record, but you do need to look at what you do have and be able to address everything that you do have. Caroline Russell, what are TCU requirements for visual inspection? So as I indicated, the rule does not require visual inspection. So I'm going to leave it at that. The rule says that you need to do a historic record review and choose the categorizations as the rule is written. It's either going to be non-lead, it's going to be lead, galvanized requirement replacement, or it's going to be unknown. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Scott.
The unknown category is pretty broad. Is there consideration to allow for unknown, not lead, or say the house was constructed in the 2000s, well after the lead main?
So the question for those of you who may not be able to hear is obviously unknown is a large category. And at what point in time could you say that an unknown is unlikely lead? Actually, the guidance does tell you that, but bear in mind that if something was built after the lead ban, that is documentation to indicate that it is a known non-lead. So that is, and if you read through the guidance, it will tell you that that's one of the first places to start at the lead ban, which in our case, the table has it correct. It is 1988. So if something was built in 2000, you're pretty well covered there. And the template, if you guys have looked at it, will tell you certain things like your ability to say how you verified, and if that documentation is building date, and you know what the building code was at that point in time, it's obviously a non-lead building code, then you just make sure you document that. So if it's ever questioned why you came up with that determination, you can back it. Okay. Are county tax records acceptable as an historic review? Yes. One of the items is other records, and they do indicate that you should reach out to other historic governmental records. So your county tax records, I mean, what is certain except for death and taxes? So so usually those are very good records, and we would encourage you to look at the build dates in those historic records. And obviously that doesn't mean that is the be all end all. Something may have been remodeled since that initial building date, but it can give you a place to start. So yes, I would say definitely look at those county tax records as a historical review option. Questions or concerns? Yeah, there are actually quite a few examples of historical records in the guidance. So let me see what they tell you the options are. So the minimum requirements.
Here.
You got them?
I could just read it.
Oh, yeah, James can take that one.
So we have previous materials evaluations. So that would be like a location of a tier 1 lead tap sampling location served by a lead service line. The second one is construction records and plumbing codes. So any local ordinance or state ordinance, permits for replacing lead service lines. Our third category is water system records. So that's kind of a catch-all for the system. Any improvement plans, any standard operating procedures, if you're in the field replacing lines already, engineering records. The fourth category is distribution system inspections and records. So your distribution system maps, tap cards, and any replacement records you may have had, like meter installation records as well. And then, like Michelle mentioned, there's the fifth category, which is the other records, which is overall catch. So tax records, county appraisal districts, anything like that.
And we've heard from other entities that they've had good tap records of knowing what the tap card says at least, and being able to back those up and be sure that they're actually correct. But then the building code has been a lifesaver for quite a few people. Unicode keeps history back for a long time. So knowing what year your municipal code went into effect can really help you know, combined with the build dates, whether a lot of your stuff is post-lead ban. That's the watershed. If you can get to post-lead ban, then you have a much better idea of where to concentrate your record search as well as any investigations you do.
So you digitize your tap records, is that considered historical?
You don't even have to digitize them.
No, they have to be.
Oh, yeah, and actually, it does indicate, let's see, what page are we on? In the, there is a, yeah, Exhibit 4.4, examples of tap cards with lead listed as service line material. Same thing, if the tap card doesn't list lead as service line material and it lists galvanized or it lists copper, then that is also a perfectly fine record that tells you that you have a historical reason to believe it is or is not lead. Question from Angel is the EPA guidance posted on the TCQ lead and copper website? I believe we have a link to it. We don't post it there directly. Either way, I can add it directly into the chat here. And like I said, the PowerPoint that I showed earlier that has those links will also be posted to our DWAWG website. Okay, James is on. He's going to put it up there. Any other questions, Gary?
So I was gonna ask, so is the TCQ, y'all are still in a TCQ guidance, or did you just maybe speak to that?
Yeah, so because EPA put out a guidance and largely it has quite a few things that we were already intending in our original guidance. And we can talk about this more during the stakeholder review, but we definitely think that getting the template out to you fast is our #1 priority at this point in time. And then evaluating whether we need our own guidance. Because a lot of what they have indicated is a lot of what we would have indicated. So largely we would tell people to go to the EPA guidance. And then if there are questions that come up that are not covered in their guidance, that's when we can supplement with our own. But right now, most of the questions we're getting are something that actually are already addressed in this guidance. So if you do have it, let me know.
Okay.
But as of right now, the guidance that we had been developing, which was the RG 593, we're pulling it back to try and see what's already covered here and only including supplemental information.
Thanks for the
Yeah, and anybody who didn't hear the question from Gary is, are we still planning on our own RG from a Texas TCEQ perspective? Or are we just going to go with EPA's guidance? Yeah, Julie asked, can you tell us anything about what to expect once the inventories are submitted? For example, will TCEQ review and reach out to the PWSs in question, similar to the EPP reviews we've been going through? I can't really go down into the super duper detail yet because we haven't gotten there, but you will see in the template that EPA released, there's actually a tab that is looking at the state checklist that they proposed. So that's kind of setting a minimum bar for us. And I would think that we're going to go at least to that minimum bar because that's the way primacy works. So we would be looking at making sure you've met those rule minimums. So making sure that you met the documentation requirements of historic review that the agency requires or that the rule itself requires. And then, yeah, eventually it would probably be like we do with our material site and selection forms. Is we'd also be working out with you to vet that you have your proper tiering and all of the rule implications that would come off of that inventory. I'm not really sure how the EPT reviews are going right now, and Britt has stepped out, so I can't tell you whether we'd be doing it in the same fashion that they're doing EPT reviews.
Probably not. It's very in-depth.
Probably not. Yeah, they're gonna, from what I understand, they're doing engineering type reviews for the EPPs, which is unlikely to be where we're at. We're looking for rule compliance and meeting the intent of the lead and copper rule and any rule whenever we perform compliance at the water supply division. Stacy?
So who needs to sign the attest to the inventory?
It doesn't state that in the rule. It just says that somebody has to. I don't think we've gotten to the point where we're gonna tell you who, just like we allow you to do a certificate of delivery for a million other things. We'd be handling that same affidavit type situation, just like it shows in that template, that it says, I can attest to these things. So anyone who can attest to those things should be capable of performing the signature and certification. Yes.
So with Aqua having almost 400 water systems, some way we can submit multiple systems and not have individual templates for every single one.
A water system is a water system is a water system. So every water system must accomplish those. We are going to do it. We're going to try to work very hard to make sure that you can electronically submit things. So if you have the ability to use this template and add an additional column that tells you which water system it's associated to, obviously the PWS ID is included, and you want to submit those separately, that's fine. But from our perspective, we expect an inventory of every single regulated entity, and that's where we're going.
It's more of a question around how to get you that data.
Yeah, we're still working on the actual data. I mean, Stephen, do you want to talk about that? Oh, sorry, 1 second. For those of you who may not have been able to hear, Scott asked because he's with Aqua, who maintains and operates several hundred facilities, would we be expecting a inventory from each facility? And yes, we do expect an inventory from each water system, but we're working on the data side of things. So Stephen's going to fill us in on that.
Well, it's going to be a very brief filling you in on it because we're working on it, but I really don't know how much I can actually talk about that. Right now, we're working on implementing the CMDP, the Compliance Monitoring Data Portal. That's the cloud-based portal for data reporting with EPA, which will work with current and future versions of SIDWIS that has the capability of accepting an Excel form. So they be reported through that. We're also looking at some other options. We received funding to develop a database. We're beginning that process in-house now. And we're exploring all the options that are available there. There may be some off-the-shelf kinds of things that weren't available that we should have thought of.
Make sure I'm not missing anyone. Tina asked, will TCQ need to approve the inventories or take action? If so, how long will this take since EPP reviews are not yet complete? That is a very good question. Obviously, in the end, as a requirement of privacy, we will have to review those inventories. We're really checking to make sure that you did your due diligence of the rule minimum requirements as we do on any other compliance determination. And then we will always work with you to improve those inventories. They are a living document. They will grow over time. They will change over time. We're not expecting you to hold and stop just because you submitted it to us. Just like a sample siting plan is something that will grow over time and change over time, and you might move your sites. Same type of thing with your inventories. Something that comes across to us as lead, hopefully you'll replace and will eventually be non-lead. And we'll expect you to keep track of that internally yourself. But on the due date, we would need a set report from you, and we will be determining compliance with the rule requirements based on that. Now, there are portions of the rule that talk about how monitoring is determined thereafter. And we are under the impression from some discussions that EPA has had and some webinars that they've put forth that there's a little bit of a lack of clarity in understanding that. So we'd expect additional information from them, clarifying how that would work. And as that comes across, that'll help inform whether you will, how quickly we know what kind of monitoring you're going to be going on, and how quickly we'll have to get that review done. Obviously, it's our priority. It will be an all hands on deck situation once those comes in, that we'll go ahead and we'll review them as quickly as possible and get you feedback as quickly as possible. But the rule is going to keep on moving. So if you provide us an inventory and you have an update wrong, you change your inventory and we account for it the next time you come around for monitoring. We'll have to roll with the punches like we do with every rule when a new rule comes out. So I can't give you black and white specifics, but generally speaking, yes, we're gonna have to, I don't necessarily say approve, but we will have to review to make sure it meets minimum compliance guidelines. And then the timeline for that would hopefully be by your next compliance period. But we'll see as the rule comes forth, because they are expecting that there will be some modifications to the lead and copper rule visions, and then that'll come across in the lead and copper rule improvements. So we still have to pause and say it depends on what they write to move forward correctly. So yeah, Tina's next question was, will inventory updates need to be submitted on a regular basis? The answer to that is yes, it's required by rule. You must submit at least as you monitor. So if you're on 3 years triennially, you have to do it at least every 3 years. If you're on annual, you'd have to do it at least annually. And if you're on 6 month, then you would also do it annually. So no more often than annually, no further apart than triennially, which you need to submit that. And then, or only available during the inspections. The answer would be yes, and available during the inspection. So not only would you have to submit it to us, but just like an SSP, you'd have to have it available like all other public water system records for your inspectors when they come out for those comprehensive compliance investigations. All right. Yes, Gary.
Michelle, couple questions, and if this is more appropriate for the stakeholder meeting later, just tell me that. I'll hold it for then.
Okay.
Getting back to the guidance, if you go through a historical record review, if you even do a field inspection and you still are like, probably mostly revolving around the scenario of, was a galvanized line ever downstream of something that was land or not?
Mm-hmm.
If it isn't currently, but you've done your historical record review, you've done a field inspection, it isn't that definitive line of was it ever, does investigatory sampling get you anywhere?
Based on what they're saying here in the guidance, not really, you can't prove a negative. So that has been posed though, that question to make that more clear.
And I thought there was some, and I'm going off some memory here from a couple of weeks, but that there was some mention in the EPA guidance about some, investigatory sampling, that could come into play, but I thought it'd be worth hearing what TCQ or your perspective is on that.
So from our understanding, having discussed this with, legal and everything, there is no statute of limitations on never downstream. So if you can definitively prove that both what from the meter, from the main to the meter, the part that you controlled as a public water system was never led, then there's no way for the other part to be galvanized requiring replacement, because that's the definition. Right. So if you can meet that bar, you've met the requirement of the rule. It doesn't account for anything in the main or further up because the way they define service line. Right. So, however, if you can't ever definitively know what your portion was at some time in history and their side is galvanized, then I think you'd have to go into that galvanized requiring replacement unless you are able to prove it otherwise. And there's no real great way to do that. It's really assuming that it needs replaced based on what I'm reading here, but that's up for change as well.
Yeah, I think that's, maybe you phrased my question better, is would investigatory sampling on that scenario be another way of proving that there's no issue of risk with that galvanized private line? So
the guidance here does imply that water quality sampling could be evaluated, but it's on a state-by-state basis. Because unknown is an option under the rule, and it's an acceptable thing. I don't know what bar that could be from a state perspective. Realistically, unknown is acceptable, and eventually you have to get rid of all unknowns. So the goal of and the intent of the rule will be met. So I'm not sure that we'd be really entertaining too much of that, but it's always a possibility as you go further down the line that you have a policy and procedure you think it has great merit to it, and we would evaluate that. We have to figure out how we go about evaluating it, because even the EPA's Cincinnati office is indicating that it can't prove a negative. So if that bar doesn't change, then that bar couldn't change for outside.
Thanks for feedback. I mean, the thing is it's known now, right?
Yeah.
Because, somebody went out and looked at it, or there's something that says, oh, it's not lead right now, and it hasn't really been since maybe 1951.
Yeah.
But what happened between 1951 and the beginning of time?
Take that argument from the private side too. They could have done for fun.
They could have done some front work, yeah, and
No.
which is also why we want to make sure you know that this is a living document, just because, and there's a portion of the guidance that tells very specifically what happens if you're a system saying you have all non-lead and what you have to do to back that up. But also there's the caveat, it's always the last requirement. If you then find out you have lead, you need to revise and resubmit. So that's all we ask is that that's all the rule asks, actually, not necessarily us at TCQ, but what the rule asks is, as you find more information, you update it and you share it appropriately. That's what the rule requires.
That's a time requirement.
Yes, if you are a non-lead, if you think you are a non-lead and then you find, I think it's 45 days, 30 days, hold on, 30 days. Yeah, notify the state within 30 days and prepare an updated inventory on a schedule established by the state. So, I mean.
So that's on any change we make on our inventory.
If you were non-lead, only, if your whole system did the requirements for systems with only non-lead service lines, if you have a single lead service line, you're already in the other category and you're on that, updating it every single time you analyze.
But suppose we say it's non-lead, find out some process that was lead.
It's not at the service line level, it's at the system level. So if your system was built in 2014, brand new system, and you certified that you're non-lead, and then you realize that you in the process there's an old farmhouse that you built around with all 2014s and they have lead, and you find that out later, then you have to do this process of letting us know that as a system, we found something. Whereas I think that most systems are going to fall into at least we found one thing, and they'll be in the other category to begin with. But that's a guess at this point. I don't know. Maybe a lot of people are non-lead and we just haven't found that out. Back to the questions in the chat here. Will regional investigators be trained on this information? Yes, they are being informed of the lead and copper rule revisions. They are also will be working on the CCI related requirements. The rule does indicate that certain things will need to be evaluated in the distribution system, like corrosivity. So obviously that's something that we can't do from here. So that will be something done boots on the ground by regional folks. And we'll be working that out as the rule goes through. We have no issue providing records for review during field inspection, but the basic concerns. Oh, yeah. Every time a new item is added, and Claire, you could probably speak to this, but every time a new item is added to an investigating checklist, they are trained on what that investigation item means, and they have their bar of understanding about what does or does not meet that requirement. So that's something that will be developed by the Office of Compliance Enforcement, who actually does the on-site CCIs. But yes, they would understand what that checklist means and what is or does not meet that standard. Julie, is it correct that all public water systems should expect to be on initial 6-month monitoring come 2025? That might actually be better for discussion this afternoon to make sure that everybody hears it. Anyone who's just attending the lead and copper rule stakeholder group, because it's not really related to this guidance. But no, the rule very specifically says when reduced monitoring would happen, when routine monitoring would happen. And you just need to read those and see which portion of those categories you fall in to know whether you would continue on your current or whether you would come back to what you're calling your initial, but what the rule now calls routine, right? Any other thoughts or concerns while we're working on the guidance itself? Is there anything in here that you wanted to potentially hit on more or talk about at a different level?
The EPA's guidance.
Yes, so where is it? It's in line, yep, chapter 2. Goes through the service line inventory, focusing on materials classifications, the categories allowed by rule and locational identifier information, and provides clarification that you must include all lines regardless of ownership and intended use, because that use may change over time. So that is how EPA has determined it to be. Unless they clarify it at a later date, that is how they read the rule. That at any point in time, if it meets the definition of a service line, which is from a main to a building inlet, then it's a service line, regardless of whether it's a fire line or a potable line or an irrigation line. It meets their definition of service line, therefore it should be included in the inventory. If you have a line that goes to a hydrant and no building inlet, or a fountain and no building inlet, then it doesn't meet the definition of a service line. But otherwise, if it meets the definition of a service line, it should be included in the inventory. That is something we asked for additional clarification on in a webinar, and that's basically the discussion we were given is, here's the definition. If it doesn't meet it, it doesn't apply, but if it does, it does apply.
In the inventory, is there any distinction between service and
So the question from Stacy, because I know she's in the further portion of the room, is in the inventory, is there any distinction between your service area and your city limits? No, you are a public water system. Nothing in the guidance or in the rule says you're a municipality or not a municipality. So you need to account for your service area because that is where your water system begins and ends. With this historic record review, it may apply from a perspective that a record would only apply to the city limits. So you do need to take that into account. But no, as far as the rule is concerned, your water system is your water system, regardless of extraterritorial jurisdiction or any of that type of stuff. Okay, one other item I wanted to put out there in my notes from earlier is in chapter 5. So the EPA specifically calls out in the first paragraph, and I quote, this is investigative methods. Quote, these methods are not required under the lead and copper rule revisions, in parentheses LCRR, but rather examples for systems to consider. So we just want to make sure people are very aware that chapter 5, which lists investigative methods, is not a requirement under the LCRR. Whereas we can go back to chapter 4, where it very specifically indicates that this is mandatorily required by rule. And we would like to emphasize that this is where public water systems should focus appropriate time and resources. Record review is required by rule, non-invasive, typically lower cost, and can be performed remotely. So that is definitely something that EPA is emphasizing. And we've also heard the concerns of, does this mean I have to dig up every line in the state? The answer is no. The rule very clearly says you need to dig up every record in the state, but not that you need to dig up every line. So I just want to make sure to double, triple emphasize that. And one more thing that we wanted to emphasize about this guidance is it is a guidance, and a lot of this activity will likely happen before the compliance date of the rule, but the rule is effective. So a lot of those best management practices, like if you're actually going to create a disturbance in the process of hydrovacing, or in the process of looking in the meter box, or in the process of turning off lines to replace other lines, please make sure to follow those best management practices of notifying the lead service line or potential lead service line people so that they're informed about what's going on and that they can take appropriate public health protections. That is something that they call out here in the guidance, and we'd like to emphasize because TCEQ, our goal is protection of public health. So that communication about the public health impacts, if you're going to cause anything that quote unquote disturbs the line and could result in lead being loosed, we want to make sure that people are being properly informed and that public health is being protected. All right. Any other questions for those attending online or anybody here in the main area?
I just want to make sure. So you are required to have our inventory submitted to TCEQ on October 16, 2022.
Correct. The compliance deadline for everybody who's attending who may not hear it online. The compliance deadline is October the 16th of 2024. So roughly 2 years from next week. Yes, true. But I'm also going to emphasize that there are 4 allowable categories. One of those is an unknown. There are specific things in the rules to do to eventually turn an unknown into a known. And we're not expecting it instantaneously, but we are expecting you to go through the rule required minimums to get to that initial inventory, which include that historical document review. Okay. I know it's a lot. All right, well, then we obviously ended up earlier than I expected. We had some changes this morning, but if nobody has anything particular about the EPA's guidance for developing and maintaining a service line inventory, I know there are a lot of LCRR questions. I do encourage you, if you haven't already registered, to register for the stakeholder group that will be reconvening at 1 p.m. And we'll be discussing a little bit about this guidance, some questions people have had, and then also putting out to you what we hope is very, very close to our final template. So feel free to join back in for that. If you have not registered, go to the DWAWG site. There is a registration link underneath the announcement for this meeting that you're currently in that it specifically says register for the LCRR stakeholder group, and make sure you get that individualized team link and that you are covered from that perspective. Any other questions or concerns online or in the room before we adjourn the morning session? No? All right. Thank you very much for attending. Our next DWAWG will be in January, as is our typical next DWAWG. It is going to be on a Tuesday morning, usually between 9 and noon in the morning, and typically the second or third week of the month. We'll look at the holidays and make sure there isn't anything and get you guys an updated date on the website as soon as we can. Please keep your mind, you're checking into the DWAWG website. We do post helpful information. We post EPA guidances when they become available. And then we also update with the next available DWAWG date at our earliest opportunity. Any feedback you may have, feel free to send it to us through the DWAWG at tceq.texas.gov email. And we look forward to seeing you again. This will be available on YouTube in the near future. All right. Thank you guys very much. We appreciate it.